Yes, for our forum, we have an exciting presentation, and Sam, it would be Stephanie, and she likes to be called Sam King, is an RPR. She is doing her presentation, and this will equal to 1 CEU for this presentation. This presentation will unlock the secret of running smooth, more efficient meetings by mastering difference between the order of business, an agenda, programs, and the order of the day. Discover why crafting a clear and effective agenda is the key to setting your meetings for success. Learn how these elements shape the flow of meetings and how applying them can boost organization and productivity, turning every gathering into a well-oiled machine. As I mentioned, there will be a Q&A led by Barbara Proctor at the end. And let's give a warm welcome to our wonderful presenter, Sam King, our PR, and presenting the difference between order of business, agenda, orders of the day, and programming.
Can everyone see that? It says you can, but I had trouble logging in. And you can hear me, I'm assuming
Yes.
also.
Yes.
Good. All right. Well, I noticed that some of you have been parliamentarians for a long time, and some of you have been parliamentarians for a short time. I can guarantee you that even every time I do a presentation or even look at Roberts, I seem to learn something. And it's just amazing that there's so much in Roberts that we just don't know until we actually start looking at it. So it's always an experience. So I hope that you will learn something from tonight's presentation. So good evening. As you know, I am Stephanie King, but I go by Sam. I hope that you will feel free, and I hope that you're allowed to ask questions as we go through the presentation. Would you please look for a piece of paper and a pencil or pen? So as I'm speaking, what I'm going through in the very first few slides gives you time to do that. I want you to participate in this presentation, and this will assist in making the presentation interactive, and you will feel that you have learned something as we spend the next hour together. At least that's my desire. This is my contact information, and I will show it again on the last slide. So as you're looking for that paper, it's more important you find a sheet of paper and a pencil and just listen to what I have to say. My motto is, a great meeting takes more time to plan than to present. And the reason is that planning and gathering the needed information may take hours, but a good meeting planned well should only take about an hour. The resource of Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition, is fondly referred to as RONR, and on many of the slides, the section and paragraph of the reference is noted. And of course, this is not legal advice, but it is from Roberts. There are 4 sections to this presentation, and they are the order of business, the agenda, orders of the day, and program. And this is what I want you to put on your piece of paper. Now, hopefully you found that sheet of paper and something to write with. Divide the paper into 4 columns with 7 rows. This doesn't have to be pretty. In fact, it probably won't be pretty, but only you will see it. And the goal is to make you look at the end of the day, we will have a more filled out and completed slide. While you're becoming that artist, let me explain that the National Association of Parliamentarians, or NAP, is allowing presenters to earn continuing education credits for the presenter and the attendees that are credentialed as professional registered parliamentarians or registered parliamentarians. To keep it simple, we refer to them as PRPs or RPs. And interestingly, there are approximately 350 professional registered parliamentarians and 630 registered parliamentarians. That's less than 1,000 in total. This presentation needs to align with the NAP body of knowledge and the NAP criteria for credentialing to qualify for credit. Not only are these both referenced, there are learning outcomes, and many slides will directly reference R&R, the 12th edition. So hopefully you've had some time to find that piece of paper and pencil and to do the 4 columns, the 7 rows, and number 1 through 6, under order of business, agenda opening, to change the agenda and closing, orders of the day, and program, both having 1 and 2. The NAP body of knowledge references are listed here for both members and for leaders, and it's what we're going to be talking about tonight. The NAP criteria for credentialing, performance expectations, which include, if you read through this, include the 4 headers and the informational boxes under each header. So there is a reason for your beautiful drawing. And finally, using the boxes, we will make sure that the learning objectives are presented and discussed. And there are 5 of them. The 4 headers. There are two types of programs. That's why you have a 1 and a 2 in the box. The 6 headers, 6 headings under the standard order of business. The difference between the agenda and the standard order of business will hopefully be very clear by the end of the presentation. Identify situations where the business may be taken out of order and why. And then know how to change the agenda and the significance of the agenda being made available ahead of time. So Robert's Rules of Order notes that all 4 of the terms are found in section 41 and paragraph 1. Roberts just recently in the last edition went to section and paragraph. It was very exciting. I was very scared in the beginning when this came out in about 2020 because we had always done it differently. But this is beautiful. It is a section and a paragraph. It's the first one in this section, and it discusses the terms. They're closely related concepts, which are very confusing when they're closely related. But hopefully you will find out what the differences are tonight. But they are separate concepts and not mutually exclusive because we will find out that they need each other. Our first concept is the standard order of business. To use the standard order of business, your organization, and many organizations do not use this. So if your organization doesn't, that's fine. But if the parliamentary authority not have established a special order of business in the bylaws, which some organizations do. 3, normally hold meetings within a 4-month period. And a 4-month period would be such as you had a meeting in January, and then within the 4th month, April, you would have another meeting. Not all organizations meet that frequently. This is what the standard order of business involves with the 6 points of information. A meeting, if you had all 6 of these, this would be your order. But a meeting may only include the reading of the minutes, the treasurer's report, new business. But that order would always be the same. So this is an order that's very important, but it doesn't mean that you use all of them. So this was my first mnemonic that I learned. Mrs. Sun, most important basic information. Again, it's the order of how they would be presented, but not always would you use them all. In fact, I can't remember ever attending a meeting that actually had business under all 6 areas. If you have, it probably was a fairly long meeting, and I feel sorry for you. Now, if you would get out your piece of paper and mark Mrs. MRS SUN in the first column, in the next few minutes, we will be investigating 1 through 6 in more detail. Minutes. Ah, yes. Bless those members that read the minutes. They are the spell checkers and the language patrol, and I love them for that. Minutes are the legal record of the organization, meant to remind those that attended the meeting what actually happened and to inform those that missed the meeting. Meeting notices, which should include the previous meeting minutes, can be sent just a week before the next meeting, a few days before the meeting, in some cases, a precise day of the month, according to their bylaws and standing rules. And as noted in the slide, one member can ask to have the minutes read out loud. Oh, would that be so dramatic on a Zoom call? We've had it happen when we went in person, but nowadays, with them being the minutes being sent ahead of time, you hope never to have to read them out loud during the meeting. The reason I joined the parliamentary unit in my area was because I became secretary of a church. I had been going to the church for a long time and loved everyone, but when I ran for the board, I found out that one, they needed a secretary, not only just a board member, but that they were having meetings that lasted 3 to 4 hours. Well, I found out why, because they were older people, and now I resemble them years later, but they were older people that loved getting together and they didn't want to use their email, even though they were sent the minutes ahead of time. So they would ask to have the secretary read them and they would dissect them line by line. Or we would correct the minutes, but I think they were dissecting. And so the first meeting as secretary, they said, oh, you must read the previous secretary's story. Oh, minutes, excuse me. And I said, I sent them to you. Did you not read them? Oh, no, I didn't open my email. So I said, okay, I will read them this one time, but in the future, I will send them to you. I expect you to read them. And that if you can't open your email, come a few minutes early. I will have enough copies for everyone. Now, this is back in the day because we would not do that today, in today's world. But interestingly, the meetings went from 3 to 4 hours to about an hour to an hour and a half. One, because we weren't dissecting the minutes and they weren't a story. But minutes are another story for another day. So the chair asked, using unanimous consent, which I love, are there any corrections to the minutes? And then they pause. Now, I have been known to do like a run-on sentence. So when I'm training people or talking to them, I say, when you see the word pause, you count to 4 in your mind, not out loud, because I actually had someone try to count out loud. And so it would be, are there any corrections to the minutes? There being no corrections to the minutes stand approved. So every time, hopefully you'll remember this, that when you're doing a script or reading a script and you see the word pause, you'll mentally count to 4. Because if you count to 5 or 6, it's way too long. And if you do it shorter, you're probably cutting someone off. So that's my tip for the day when reading the script. Under the reports of officers, we usually see the president and the treasurer's report. And then at the annual meeting, it's common for all the officers, the board to report so that they can brag about their accomplishments for the year, and all the standing committees to give short reports. The hardest part of planning for a meeting is finding out which committees want to report at the meeting, if they plan to make a motion, and the wording of the motion. An officer can give a report and make a recommendation, but if there's a motion involved, it has to be made by someone else. That motion will need to be seconded. On the other hand, if a committee makes a motion and the committee is two or more, the motion does not require a second. Special committees are not in the bylaws. There's sometimes, well, they can be mentioned in your bylaws, but they're not listed in your bylaws. Let me rephrase. They are sometimes called select committees or ad hoc committees. They are made for a special purpose, such as a Halloween party committee. The committees report in the order that they're appointed, and after their final report, they cease to exist. I have seen a presiding officer, after the final report, struggle for what to say. The best thing is to say thank you. So, for example, the Halloween Party Committee reports on the party that happened last month, and they have completed their work. The president should thank them for hosting that terrific event and say thank you. Special orders, the ones that we will normally see, come from our bylaws. Voting on new members in a social organization, nominations for officers, or voting for officers are good examples. In one of my organizations, the bylaws require that the January meeting, the president must appoint two special committees, a finance committee and an audit committee. Unfinished business. Yes, it used to be referred to as old business, and some organizations still do, but it's wrong. It's unfinished. But it's one of those quandary areas that's like what really goes into unfinished business. Well, Roberts has an answer for that. Unfinished business needs to meet one of the four qualifiers to actually be unfinished business. Questions pending when the meeting adjourned, questions that were unfinished business at a previous meeting but not reached before adjournment, and general orders set for previous meeting but not reached before the adjournment. But here's the kicker. This is what we normally would run into with unfinished business, not those things. But Roberts has an answer for this too. We find that many times because something was mentioned at a meeting, previous meeting, and that we believe that in this meeting it should be under unfinished business, we believe this in all our heart. This is so common that Roberts specifically notes that an informal understanding does not make it unfinished. In this case, it should be brought up under new business. Then there's that general orders, which we really don't know what that is either, but it is important. This is more specific in that it is something that was postponed to this meeting. If there is more than one item, then they would be taken up in the order that they were made. So they were intentionally postponed, not unfinished. New business should always be listed on the agenda, and I look at it as the dreaded new business. Hopefully, your organization asks for motions to be in writing before the meeting. Well, we can't make people drink, we can't make a horse drink water, we can't make people write out motions, but we can request that they do that. And we know that this doesn't always happen, and any new business can be brought up at the meeting. So here's a fun story. I am the parliamentarian for a state organization, and the president relies on me to write the script word for word and to include motions when known, which we should all know what they are ahead of time because they're supposed to be in writing. It was 3 minutes before the meeting was to start, and the previous parliamentarian walked up to us on the platform, and I am thinking, that is so nice of her to come to tell us hello. But much to my shock, she wanted me to write down, basically on a napkin, her motion that she was going to make under new business. I asked if she'd filled out the forms for the required motion and given it to the recording secretary because I thought maybe I could take a picture of it and get the correct wording. No, no, I haven't done that yet. My president looked at me with some fear, and I told her that I would write the script out for her, and she handled the motion correctly. But you just never know what will happen at a meeting or whom it will be coming from. The state meets again later this month, and I actually emailed the previous parliamentarian the other day to see if she had any more motions that she wanted to bring up for this meeting, and she assured me for this meeting there were none. So the chair would state, the next item of business is new business. Is there any new business? And it's very important that you have that on your agenda. And well, when we get to our agenda, we'll see that. But yes, it's very important that we can include that. So now we're to that sheet of paper again. So we would have minutes, the reports of officers, board, and standing committees. Again, standing committees are found in your bylaws. Special committees are uh, are not found in the bylaws, but are uh, adopted by the assembly for special items for them to do. I look at them as the scouts that go out and find things and bring the information back. Special orders, which could be voting, nominations, unfinished business, and new business. First quiz. So if you wrote down for the 6 things in the first column, you will get this correct. Now, granted, there are a lot of words in each of these sentences, but only one of them is correct. I checked. I checked twice. Does anyone want to unmute and make a guess? I know it's hard to read these things.
See,
Yes, C. It is C. Thank you. Very good. I'm proud of you. We need to move on to the agenda, which is very important when we go to a meeting. We have found out that there is a need in order to complete our business, and we may only have 1 or 2 of the 6 items, but they are going to be in that order. Of course, one of them is always going to be new business, but they are to be in a specific order. And now the agenda incorporates the order of business. So the order of business was Mrs. Sun, and now we're going to see what the agenda is. And as a president and past president of different organizations, the agenda is a very important item. And actually, it's the basis of everything for the meeting. So when thinking about preparing an agenda for the meeting, it's important to gather the following documents. The previous minutes, because there may be something that you need to look at that will involve this meeting. The bylaws and standing rules of your organization, your parliamentary authority. In my case, it's RNR 12th edition, and any reports from the officers and committees. Now that's a little harder to gather, but it can be done. The agenda is the foundation for the meeting and the first document that needs to be completed. I cannot say that. I know I'm repeating myself, but that is so important. If the presiding officer uses a script, the agenda is what the script is written from. So being a parliamentarian, I have been in a meeting, probably more than one, but I know of one for sure, where the agenda and the script did not match. So now that I've said that, you will start paying attention to your agendas and the order to see if what happens in the meeting follows that agenda, the published agenda. It happens. And it's because the president made up their agenda, which I have an example of one later on tonight, makes up their agenda, and the scriptwriter, which is may be the parliamentarian, may not be the president or presiding officer, and so they don't match. It can happen. So you have to pay attention to meetings more, see what happens there. So this is an agenda with opening ceremonies. We see right here. And we have the order of business, our famous Mrs. Sun, and closing activities. Hopefully this allows you to visualize how the agenda uses the order of business. So they're different, but they need each other. In some parliamentary units, they do not have opening ceremonies. Invocation, which I would refer to as a prayer, is not used in any of the units that I attend. Ideals, inspiration, or thought for the day are frequently given, and everyone loves having visitors to a meeting and introducing and welcoming them to the meeting, which is what we did this evening, first thing. It's a very good thing to do. So we see that my cursor is not following, but you can see in purple, there's opening ceremonies, and we establish a quorum. We may adopt the agenda. We'll find out more about that later. Mrs. Sun, and then closing activities. This is an agenda for a unit meeting. Notice it's a cafeteria plan. Things are picked and used, but they all follow the order of business, opening ceremonies, Mrs. Sun, and the closing activities. So we have our opening ceremonies, and we have our three things from Mrs. Sun. We have our minutes, the reports of officers, and in this case, there is no treasurer report, and new business. Per Roberts, there's a specific order for the opening ceremonies. And 41, 32, section 31, paragraph 30 to 32. When the president tells me there's going to be a song sung after the Pledge of Allegiance, I have to ask, what is the song? Because should it be the national anthem, it must come before the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. On another note, twice in different organizations, I've had someone question the use of an inspiration. It seems that some members are not open to any wording that would be like a prayer, and that's fine. For both, I had to explain that being uplifted with positive thoughts is much different than a prayer. I love to be uplifted, and there are many great inspirations out there to encourage us and uplift our thoughts that are not religious. Both organizations are still reading inspirations, and they still are enjoyed by the members. So there is a difference, depends on your organization, whether you have a prayer or you just have a thought for the day. In the olden days, to establish a quorum, when meetings were held in person, you entered the room, the secretary would have a piece of paper for you to sign, and you would be entered on the roll. But you could also, just by looking around the room, tell whether or not there was a quorum. When being on Zoom, it's easy to see if there's a quorum, but many organizations on Zoom still use the roll call to establish the quorum. What if you don't have a quorum? Well, there's 4 actions that you can take. A motion to fix the time to which to adjourn. 2. So it means we're going to end this meeting and reconvene either later today in 2 hours after the traffic is cleared, or maybe we're going to come back again next week when we can have the room again on the same day at the same time. So that's one option. If the members cannot be found, then we should adjourn. If members are stuck in traffic and will be here in 30 minutes, then recess for 35 minutes. And the last is to take measures to obtain a quorum. When we couldn't find faculty on our small campus for the faculty senate meeting that they were required to attend, well, we did this. We called the offices. their personal cell phone numbers. We sent members to find them because, one, they were required to come, and we knew they were supposed to be on campus during that time period. So there are things you can do if you do not have a quorum. Adoption of the agenda. It's customary to adopt an agenda program and for each session in organizations that do not hold frequent regular meetings. I am a member of our local government advisory board for taxing districts, and we meet 3 to 4 times a year. Approval of the agenda is listed on the agenda, which means we have to approve it, and the agenda can be corrected, but it must be adopted before we can continue in the meeting. So if your organization does adopt the agenda, it's usually by unanimous consent or majority vote. Again, I do love that unanimous consent. I love that. To change the agenda later, it takes a 2/3 vote, a majority of the membership, or unanimous consent. This is usually changed by using unanimous consent, stating if there's no objection, we will do such and such. But let's say something needs to be handled earlier than it's listed in the agenda. The Assembly could suspend the rules with a 2/3 vote, move to lay on the table an item that's next to get to the needed business with a majority vote, or 3, move to postpone to a certain time. Again, this takes a majority. So let's say that the treasurer needs to leave, but the president's report is next. The president's report could be laid on the table, then the president's report would be laid on the table, then the treasurer's report can be given. And after the treasurer has reported, the president's report can be taken from the table. So when you get into time crunches, there are a few things you can do. You just need to know how to handle it. So let's stop and review the opening ceremonies for a minute. There's a call to order, then the optional opening ceremonies. Establish a quorum, which can be done by the secretary reporting their X number of members present, which represents a quorum, or the roll call in which the secretary would state after the call that there was a quorum present. So I've always heard, and again, I came from up north, that a quorum should be the number of members that would show up in a snowstorm. Of course, now I live in Florida, and it's probably more akin to who would show up in a hurricane. No one, because we can see that coming. But concept is that it should be representative of the organization and small enough to continue to hold meetings. Please never use a percentage of the entire membership as your quorum, because that can become quite exciting at every meeting. In one of my organizations, there was a 20% of the entire membership, and that was our quorum. But we had to calculate the number that was needed to make the quorum at every meeting because we had, unfortunately, members that died, members that moved, and sometimes we actually had new members come in during the year. It was a challenge because that number was important only for that meeting. Some members came in late, some left early, so it's much easier if you just have the same number from meeting to meeting. So they changed the quorum from the percentage to a number 8 after my presidency. And 10 years later, it's still 8. So we are going to go on to find out about closing activities. So we have our opening, we have Mrs. Sun, and we still need to find out about closing. Terrific. The meeting's almost over. Some, but not all organizations have good of the order, general good and welfare, or open forum. In parliamentary units, This is used for members to tell about an issue that they may have encountered and would love to have some input from the other members. It can be used for good news or for member updates. I have seen a member try to make motions under the good of the order, but it was stopped as motions should be made during new business. Announcements should always include the next meeting date and time and place should the meeting place change. And that should be noted. The program can go just about anywhere, and that is a person that's like me that's giving a presentation. Before the meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, such as you have here, before adjournment, or after the meeting adjourns. I have been in meetings that the program must occur before the meeting adjourns, just in case, as it's noted here, the assembly needs to take action on the presentation. And on the other side, I have never seen the assembly take action. So it's just one of those things that just what if you need to do something before you don't adjourn the meeting until after the program. And it's best to know when the meeting is winding down, it's time to go home. Some chairs will ask for the motion to adjourn, but this is so much easier. And before I read it, to be honest, Roberts does not say to note the time, but if and should you love your secretary and want to spoil them, then I recommend that the chair does add the time so the secretary can just finish writing and not have to look to see what time it is. If there's no further business and no objection, the meeting will now adjourn. Since there's no objection, the meeting is adjourned at 7:47 p.m. So we're back to that sheet of paper because we've looked at second column where we saw that there were opening ceremonies. We could change the agenda with 3 different methodologies, and we have closing activities. And you may have more notes than that. You may have less, but this is what I would recommend. Okay, the next item and the third column is orders of the day. But before that, let's review the standard order of business. Oh, I did stick this in. This is supposed to be a funny, so I hope you'll humor me. The standard order of business is Mrs. Sun, which we know that if we only use 3 areas out of the 6, oh, excuse me, they would be used in order. The agenda can include opening ceremonies and closing activities, but the question is, how do they fit together? And my visual effect, I'm sorry I showed you, but there it is, sandwich effect. We have our opening ceremonies, which is the top layer of bread. We have Mrs. Sun, which is the filling, and we need it. Maybe not all of it, but we need some of it. And then we have our closing activities, which is our other layer of the bread. But I'm not trying to make you hungry. I'm just trying to make you understand that they do fit together. So if you can still picture those 2 slices of bread, this is what it would look like. The opening ceremonies, the Mrs. Sun, and the closing activities. And we are up to our second quiz. If you're preparing to work on the next meeting's agenda, what should you have with you before you start? And the answer is, and it's not a drink, okay? So it's one of these things. And it would be D. Oh, yeah, all are correct. Because you need the minutes from the previous meeting, you need the officers and committees report, or at least a promise, and then the bylaws, standing rules, and hopefully your R&R. So now we're up to orders of the day. We're moving to the third column. The reason that this is in the presentation is because it can relate to the order of the agenda. A member can require the assembly to conform to the agenda or take up a general or specific order due to come up at a specified time. I don't know that I've ever been in a meeting that happened, but it could. Roberts is very firm about this. And a orders of the day is a privilege motion. The person may interrupt another when another has the floor. It does not need a second. It is not debatable. It is not amendable. And the result is determined by the chair. Now, until I read Roberts really closely, I'd only seen one way that this ever happened. But let's look at this. We have two. The orders of the day allows a member to require the assembly to conform to its agenda and the chair rules, which is what I've always been taught. But the member can require the assembly to conform to its agenda, to take up a general or special order due to come up at a specific time, and the assembly is deep in debate. The chair can request a vote. So this is when I chair a meeting. Things can go astray. If so, there are members that are watchers and they keep me in line, and I thank them for that. The member interrupts and says, I call for the orders of the day. The president skipped the treasurer's report. There is no second. The president, being me, has to respond. The orders of the day are called for. At this time, the treasurer will give the treasurer's report because I just skipped it. You think I could read? Yes, but I skipped it anyway. I don't do that anymore because I do use a script, but when I was doing my winging, as I used to call it, using the agenda only to run a meeting, uh, it really makes a difference. You don't have these kind of problems normally if you're using a script, because this is just bringing everything back into where it's supposed to be. Now, the second one is very interesting because this, again, is the privilege motion, but the chair may sense the assembly would prefer to conclude the pending business. How interesting. Madam President, I call for the orders of the day. The orders of the day are called for. The orders, and the president knows this, okay? The orders of the day are to take up the motion on the purchase of the Spencer building. The question is, will the assembly proceed to the orders of the day? Two-thirds vote in the negative is required for the assembly to refuse to take up the orders of the day. So the president's stating, we really want to finish what we're doing right now. It's 1, 2 o'clock, whatever time was required that we do go to the orders of the purchase of the Spencer building. And do you want to finish this or do you want to go to the orders of the day? All those in favor of proceeding to the orders of the day, raise your electronic hand. Lower your hand. All those against proceeding to the orders of the day, raise your electronic hand. Lower your hand. There are two-thirds in the negative, and the orders of the day will be taken up after the current business is completed. Or it could have went the other way. There is not two-thirds in the negative, and the orders of the day will be taken up. So the chair in the first example took complete control. And the second example, the chair is giving the assembly the opportunity to make that decision. But they still have to go, as soon as they finish this, to the orders, the actual purchase of the Spencer building. And this is sort of how I envisioned your paper would look like at this point. The chair, it allows a member to require the assembly to conform the chair rules. And the other one is to take it up at a later time. That's not what it says there, though, but basically that's what it is. And the chair requests a vote. So another quiz. Oh, quizzes are required, in case you didn't know that. It's one of those uh, unwritten rules that you're supposed to have quizzes in your presentations. So, can the chair handle this, or does the chair have to put this to a vote? And the member says, I call for the orders of the day. The orders of the day are called for. Please state the reason for the orders of the day, because many times, oh, it's happened to me more than once. Orders of the day are called for. They don't tell you what it is. That other example, they did say what it was. The treasurer hadn't given their report. Sometimes it's just like, let's just make the chair suffer. Like, oh no, what's wrong? Please state the reason for the orders of the day. The members are talking among themselves, and we need to go back to the agenda. What does the chair do now? Does the chair state the next item of business, or does the chair put it to a vote? We all know it's going to be number one. Yes. And I have been in meetings where this motion has saved a presiding officer and saved the meeting, because in the olden days when we met in person, you had the people in the back row that want to start chatting, and then someone in the front row. And of course, I live in Florida. No one can hear. No one, if they buy hearing aids, they don't use them. And so things get louder. There's a crescendo. The chair is like, what do I do? I shouldn't be tapping, tap, tap, tap with my gavel. So this is a great way to assist the presiding officer that is caught in this type of situation. The members have regressed to chatter among themselves, and the chair is unsure how to bring the focus of the meeting back. And this will do it. And we thank you, Member A. So there are people as members of an organization, there are things you can do to make it better, every meeting better. So in the final column, it says program. Please write down agenda in the form of a program and a program within an agenda. It may not make a lot of sense right now as you're writing, but it will in 10 minutes, hopefully. Oh. The program includes times for speakers, meals, and other non-business matters. And this is a program. And notice it includes timing, breaks, lunch. When you attend a convention or conference, this is what you're going to see. When are the breaks? And more importantly, when and where is lunch? Lunch was in the atrium, and it was good. So the point is that this is a program, and we have a membership meeting within the program, which has its own separate, you have to visualize this with me, its own separate agenda on another sheet of paper. I probably should add that to this. But anyway, you're going to have to visualize it tonight. So we have this annual May meeting, membership meeting, and there is an agenda that goes with it specifically. It says it starts at 9 a.m. and it goes through the opening ceremonies, the standard order of business, and the closing. And so that is a whole separate thing. And at 10:30, there is a break, and at 10:45, there is going to be a presentation by Carl Knorr. So we just found out that an agenda does not have times. So I have a story. I have a small chapter agenda that was sent to me recently by the president. Now, mind you, people become president because no one else will do it. Someone thinks they're the best person for the job. And it doesn't mean that they know how to set up a meeting, set up an agenda, do anything of that nature. And that's why you find, if you're in that position, you find someone's a parliamentarian and make them your BFF, because they know stuff. So this is what happened, and it was kind of funny, and I thought I should show it to you because she's a wonderful woman, but she sent this to me, and it basically is timing for her. I know that why she put the times on. It was internal timing for her as the presiding officer, president, that she would do this. And she pretty much got her orders and everything in order. I mean, kudos to her. I told her that I would send her an agenda with a header for the organization, which is very beautiful, but I couldn't mimic it here. I didn't have space, number one, and that it would not have times on it. The times seemed to be for her information so that she could time herself and not the assembly. She is the president and not a parliamentarian, and I have seen agendas written on a piece of scrap paper, and the presiding officer followed the agenda completely, perfectly, and without a script. It was not this lady, but kudos to the other lady that did that. I was shocked. So she did get her opening, and at some point we're going to establish a quorum a little early, approval of the minutes, the reports of officers, committee, and new business. So look at this really hard because next sheet, I'm going to show you what it actually turned out to look like with names changed, of course. We had our welcoming, we had our appointment of the timekeeper, approval of the minutes, the report of 3 officers, reports of standing committees. This is the first meeting back after the summer break because they're teacher related, educational center, I can tell you that much. And so with that, we had 2, 4, 6, 7. They have more than 7 committees, but these were the ones we're actually reporting. And then we had our special committee, and I don't believe they had any new business. I can't remember. It's been a couple weeks. But this is what I sent back to the president. The header was gorgeous. It was in color, and the agenda does not have the speaker meals or other non-business matters or timing. So again, this is what she sent me, and this is what she got back. It made her look really good. And that's my job as a parliamentarian, to make others look good. So the second type of a program is the program within an agenda. It can be at the beginning of the agenda. Sometimes they're even before the agenda kicks in. It's before the meeting starts, such as the one we just saw. They did, if you remember what she wrote, was a presentation before we even started the meeting. So it can, but if the program's within an agenda, it can be at the beginning, at the end, and sometimes it's after the meeting adjourns. So note that it's accepted that the program may be placed by a special rule within your agenda. It may be practice, custom, or you can even suspend the rules if, say, the speaker comes early and you know that they're on a time. They have to be in a certain place at another time. They're coming to the meeting. You see them outside. Uh, Roberts is very big into saying that at that point you would lay whatever they're discussing on the table. And the question is, why would you lay something on the table? We talked about that earlier, but it can be done. And that it's because I see Mr. Smith coming in from the parking lot. And so you want to stop the meeting and have the presentation. Because even though most of our presenters are within our community, such as the group that I showed you that other agenda on, all their speakers are not related to the organization. So they would not stay for the meeting. That's why in that case, the presenters are before the meeting starts. So it just depends on your organization. So, but for most organizations, once they find that perfect soft spot for the program, they normally keep the program in that place because the members expect it to be there. So in the case of my my lady friend that was a president, it's before the meeting. But in this case, And this is a local unit in Florida. They have their inspiration and then they have their presentation. So the program is within the meeting, and sometimes it's right after announcements or right before adjournment. In most cases, it's the form of custom. In this case, members have to be on time to get to the presentation. In my upcoming state meeting, the program is always at the beginning of the meeting, right after the opening ceremonies. We have our two presenters. There's usually two. They're very short, limited to like 5 to 10 minutes. But this year, when writing the script and the agenda, it was requested that the place the speakers right before the adjournment. That was version number 1. Well, version number 2. Put the speakers right before the adjournment, move them from beginning to the end. But then we went to version number 3. After the discussion, it was determined that the two speakers needed to be after the meeting adjourned because the meeting room had to be cleared by a specific time to be set up for lunch. And by having the meeting completed, if the meeting ran late and the two speakers then could be moved because they're outside of the meeting to present during lunch. So that was hard for my presiding officer to do that because she still wanted them within the meeting. And I kept telling her, if you think that we need to be out of that room by a certain time and you don't know that we can be out, if they start presenting, you don't want to stop them. So let's close the meeting and then we have two presenters, let one present. Then if we have time, and if we don't have enough time for the second one, move them to the luncheon. And the reason we have to be out of the room is because we're in a hotel and they have to break down the room, which is from long tables to round tables. And you can just envision how long that takes when you have 150 people. This program is our guest speaker, the woes of Roberts, is after the meeting has adjourned, which is the way we've always done it. We've always done it that way. So if I went to the executive board, which I'm on, and I said, oh, by the way, I think we should have the presenter at a different place in our agenda, they would ignore me because this is our custom. We always have it after the meeting adjourns. So this is sort of how I envisioned your paper would look like at the end of the presentation. I will be putting the PDF slide deck in the chat immediately after the end presentation, because if I put it in earlier, it would be a problem if someone signs in after I put it in there. Also, my email address is on the next to last slide, so it's very easy to remember. And should you want me to send it to you, I can do that also. So this is our final quiz question. And the terms order of business, agenda, orders of the day, and program refer to closely related concepts having to do with the order in which business is taken up in a session and the scheduling of particular business. Is that true or false? And I hope that you all get this right because it is. I don't want to know anyone that guessed false. It is true. That is true. And that was from an earlier slide. I had a different question and it was so confusing that it made my eyes cross. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. It's nearing the end of the presentation. We don't want to do that. So my references for this were the Roberts Rules of Order, newly revised 12th edition, the NAP criteria for credentialing, and the NAP body of knowledge. Oh, I don't know what happened there. I'm sorry, I did not mean to do that. Okay, this I did mean to do. Before we leave, are there any questions? And my email address is down at the bottom. So Barbara, are we allowed to take questions now?
Yes, yes, definitely. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to take advantage of asking Sam King at this time concerning agendas, the standard order of business, special orders, or programs?
Oh, I was hoping there for a minute Nancy was going to ask a question. Oh, Brenda.
All right, you have two. Go ahead.
Hi.
Okay.
Oops. Hi. My question is in regards to, I noticed the term was used that it's custom, but if something is custom, should it be included in their bylaws or somewhere written and not just something that's customary for them to do during meetings? If the way I worded it makes sense.
Oh, no, that makes sense.
Okay.
Recently, I was in a meeting where they wanted to add the inspiration to the actual agenda. And they wanted to make it so that if they were going to add it, that it would constantly be there for the next presiding officer, that they would know of it. And it's a custom. So it did not have to be taken that far. And they actually, I believe, postponed indefinitely that motion to put it into the standing rules. So it just depends. Most of the time, uh, something like that that is within Roberts, which it is, does not have to, it's a custom. The Roberts says the program can go anywhere, for example. So he's not saying you have to have it within the agenda. Does that help? If you think it's important enough, yes, you should put it in
Yes,
the
it
standing
does.
rules.
Yes. Okay.
Doris,
My question
hi.
is, in doing the agenda, what actually comes first, the announcements or for the good of the order? Because I was under the understanding that the president makes the announcements and then all other announcements come under for the good of the order.
Don't. Good of the order comes first, but I don't have the reference.
Okay.
Barbara? Barbara
Well, I
Proctor,
don't.
do you have your-
Oh, I memorized Roberts. I have the reference right here at my fingertips, right? Not quite.
No, that's a good
Now, good
question.
of the order typically, yeah, good of the order typically does come before the president announcements. Some people call it the good and welfare. And it's, you have new business where you have to have a motion and then you have discussion. And then under good of the order, you can have discussion without a motion. Some people use it to talk about personal announcements. Other people use it to talk about the organization, what they'd like to see done, what they think could be done better. When people use it, when the president does the announcements first, it's usually because good of the order is more personal and it doesn't relate to the organization. If the comments and questions relate to the organization, they typically does it first, and then the president does the announcements at the end of the meeting. If you do it the other way around, that's a custom. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not the way that it's set out in Roberts, but Roberts is very flexible. It allows you to have customs and to do things differently than they're listed in the book. So if you have your good of the order and it includes announcements from members and you do it after the president's announcements, that's okay. That's a custom. There's nothing wrong with it. Don't feel like you're doing something wrong and you have to fix it. It's okay. It's just different.
Okay, I did find the reference. It's 4134 for that. Tom,
Thank you very much for the presentation. Could you go in a little more detail about when, I missed that part about the timing. When should you put the timing and when don't you? Or should you always if you can?
um, okay, a program has timing. A program would be more for a convention or for a, I can't even think, conference. So that, can you see my screen? I guess I
Yes,
need to make sure you can still see it.
yes.
Okay, and so in this case, we see that within the program, which in this case could go over 2 days, but I didn't have room for everything. They do have a membership meeting, which would include the agenda. The agenda, of course, has no timing. So normally you don't have timing when you're doing an agenda. If you're doing a program, you do want the timing because you want to put the breaks in, you want to put in the lunch and anything else that you would need for timing, because you may have to move to other rooms, because this is more of a bigger organizational uh, meeting. Does that help at all? She put it in hers because she is the president and she wanted timing. I look at this as a personal agenda,
I see.
for lack of a better term. It's not Robert's at all, but it's a personal listing of how she thinks it should go. So she's thinking at 6:10 that they're going to have the welcome and introductions if all goes well. And of course, we did change a little bit about how she had this set up when we went to the actual agenda that I did for her. But that's okay because I heard, I didn't get to go to the meeting, that she did this within an hour. So, and you saw all the reports that they had, and they do time them. So that was another reason that she could keep within the hour. That was just a little side note. Timing of reports is important. Does that
All right.
help?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't.
It's
Yes,
AJ.
Sergeant, on AJ.
AJ.
Thank you,
AJ.
Okay.
Sam, for the presentation. Learned a lot. Well, first of all, for the timing, I definitely would like to have in the program the timing, especially for dinner, because I don't want to be late for that. And if they're late, I definitely will call for the orders of the day, and the reason is I'm hungry. Anyway, that's just kidding. My question is, some clubs they press for time and they squeeze in the program the the meals, not only with the presentation but with the business meeting. My question: have you experienced that, and how does that go? Is there too much disruption on that? Thank you.
I think I've only seen it once because we ran out of time, but it just depends. I mean, hopefully the timer is the key to keeping the meeting running smoothly. That's so I have a personal story when that unit that had the roving quorum of 20%. Also, we had a lady that every time she got up to give a report, and we sold pecans, we made thousands of dollars on these pecans back in the day. And she would get up, and she was a teacher, an ex-teacher. And so when she got the floor, she thought, I need to talk. I need to talk for 5 minutes. And she would like repeat herself, and she was so excited, and no one wanted to tell her, okay, stop. So when I became president, I said, we've got to put a timer in, and we need to explain to everyone. So I called it my Joanne timer because Joanne was the one that just went on and on and on. But it happens in every meeting when you give someone, the rule is don't give them the microphone, but you have to when they're doing a report, but tell them you can only do it for so long. And hopefully they practice at home. That might be asking too much, but it is hard when the meeting doesn't run according to the timing that you think it should. I don't know how to make it better, but it's okay depending on the situation. If you're out in the middle of an atrium and you're trying to have someone give us a report or presentation, that's pretty ugly. But if you're in a room and you're having your lunch within the room, yes, that's very doable. I hope
Thank
that
you.
answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Andrea? Andrea, I love your
Yeah,
last name.
thank oh, hi, you're my sister.
Yes,
Shoot,
we
it's a
are.
secret. Yes. Thank you for your amazing presentation. My question, you quoted numbers, the number of RP and PRP. Can you say that again? Is it around the country?
Yes. This is in total. I know it's very shocking. I'm sorry. Don't look. I'll make your eyes go blind. Okay, now they've changed because they just had their national training conference, and I believe we did get some more. And I tried to move those numbers into these, how many new people we received as hopefully professional registered parliamentarians and registered parliamentarians. So the first test you take is the registered parliamentarian test, and it's very difficult, 630 approximately. I may be off one or two, but not very much. And
Mhm.
on the professional, because you have to take the registered first, then you can qualify to take the professional registered parliamentarian, and there's approximately 350. Now, that doesn't include retired members. I just picked the active ones because those are the ones that are still on the rolls of active. There are some that are retired.
Okay.
So
Thank you
it's
so
a
much.
small number. Yes, I thought that
Yeah.
was one of those fun facts that you would like, and I'm so happy you asked.
Yeah, sure.
And
Thank you.
okay, I don't want to call on Anna because I could not see you. I'm sorry, Anna. I'm doing two screens and I'm just happy they worked. So I apologize that I missed your timing, your beautiful timing behind
You
you.
were perfect. You were perfect on time.
Okay,
Uh, I have a
but you didn't
question.
raise your hand. Okay, you have a question. Okay, you didn't say it just to tell me I was good. Okay.
Yeah, that was a fantastic presentation. Now I'm a little bit confused about the part. You said that you don't put the timing on the agenda. However, if you have a timekeeper, how would they know that certain parts need to take certain length, duration, and how would you keep up if you don't have the timing on the agenda and if you try to recruit someone as a timekeeper?
Hold on. Okay, so this is the one I did for my local organization. And what happens is that they appoint a timekeeper. It depends on what you have. Like in my parliamentary unit, we appoint a parliamentarian, a timekeeper, and a Zoom tech, for lack of a better term. And they're all appointed so that they can work with the president during the meeting. And it's by unanimous consent if there's no objection. But the point you're asking is, how do these people know? So the president, when she asked the standing committees, you have 3 minutes. This is kind of it's a custom because I don't believe it's in their standing rules, but it's a custom and everyone accepts it because at the appointment time, she has the timekeeper will do this at 1 minute. You have 3 minutes. At 1 minute, she'll do this. At 2 minutes, she'll do this. And at 3 minutes, she'll yell stop. And because I'm pretending we're in person, she yells stop if we're on Zoom too. So it doesn't matter. But the officers, we have one officer in one of my organizations that never can make 3 minutes. So the deal is everyone knows they have 3 minutes, but let's say it's the treasurer's report. For some reason, she wants to run over 3 minutes. She tells the president, I can't do it in 3 minutes because I have to talk about some other things. And that would never happen, but let's pretend. And so the president would say, at this time, we will be receiving the treasurer's report from Barbara Brown, and Barbara has requested for extra time. And I normally don't in the script say what the extra time is because we don't know how long Barbara's going to talk. We just know it's more than 3 minutes. If there's no objection, Barbara Brown will be allowed extra time to report. And since there's no objection, Barbara Brown will be given extra time. But everyone else, unless they've asked for it, are going to be tied to 3 minutes. And this keeps the meeting moving. It's a very important function, but everyone has to understand if you need more than 3 minutes, you need to ask. I actually in a group that they do 2 minutes, and they know the rules. So actually, they like it because they only have 2 minutes, get it done, and get out of there because there's so many, there's like 16 reports at that point. So it's one of those things that once you start doing it, you love it because everyone understands. They understand that yes, I'm tied to 2 minutes to give my report, but I'm going to be out of here in an hour and 5 minutes. So instead of 2 hours. So it's just, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for being my timekeeper. Barbara.
Yes, thank you. Timekeepers are interesting in the part, they both serve the same function in the Toastmasters meeting and at the parliamentarian, normal ordinary society meeting, and that they keep track of the time for different speakers. In a parliamentarians meeting, we usually adopt special rules of order or standing rules that limit the number of times a person may speak and how long each speak may be. So when we talk about timekeeper at a parliamentarian meeting, I don't mean meeting parliamentarians, but a meeting where you're serving as parliamentarians. The timekeeper tracks how long someone's speaking in debate. And again, it could also include committee reports. If you have 3 minutes, they let you know when your 3 minutes are up. If you're allowed to speak 2 times in debate for 3 minutes, the timekeeper is keeping track of how long each person speaks in debate. It's confusing, or at least I found it confusing, when you have like a convention program where you have specific times for things. And if someone doesn't do what's supposed to be done at that specific time, you can say, I call for the orders of the day. And it forces the assembly to go to whatever is on the agenda at that time. So then, that's what I learned in my training as a parliamentarian. So I show up at a Toastmasters meeting and everything is timed. And it took me a while to understand that timing, yes, it's strictly enforced in most cases in Toastmasters meetings, but it's not, it's more for meeting planning and it's part of the program. It's not part of the meeting itself. It's more for training and making people cognizant of the time. And yes, it's planning in the same sense that you want to get everything done in a short period of time. But at a Toastmasters meeting, and Tom could correct me, would anyone ever say a call for the orders of the day if you're running behind or ahead schedule in a Toastmasters meeting?
Not,
No, probably not, right?
not normally.
Yeah.
It
So
depends.
it's more of a guide.
There might be situations. Let's say you have 3 speakers and they keep speaking overtime, and sometimes you have to make a tough call, but this is rather exceptions than a rule.
And that's a good point. How would you just interrupt them, or would you use those words? I call for the orders of the day. How would you interrupt someone that's speaking like 3 minutes over the time limit? What would you say, Anna?
Well, we usually have the Toastmaster of a day should say something, and the exact wording would depend on the club, because some clubs are more formal, some clubs are less formal, but they would use certain phrasing. I wouldn't suggest anything in particular because I acknowledge the differences between different clubs.
Okay. So does anyone else have any? Oh, Jenny Lou has a question. Go ahead.
It was a comment to build upon Anna's question, and also Sam's comment about the timing on the agenda. So for example, project managers like to put times on the agenda for work agendas to ensure a timely meeting. But I think Toastmasters have a couple of ways to deal with it. One is they put the timing cues for the project or speech inside the speaker section of the agenda, which then may or may not include the timing, so that if you adopt the agenda, you're not held to those specific times. And then the other aspect is the custom. Some clubs do have a cane, a little sound signal, or a verbal cue when people are over time to ensure that it's a timely meeting. So it depends on the club, but it can be disruptive and affect some of the speaker's confidence when you interrupt them, especially for some, for example, neurodivergent communities. So I guess that's why it's a bit of a custom, but it's also in part because I think most Toastmasters clubs don't know parliamentary procedure, so they don't know the option of calling the orders of the day or how to interrupt politely, unless the Toastmaster of the day kind of transitions this segue smoothly.
Oh, Anna, would you have your backgrounds available to demonstrate how you show when your times?
So,
Backgrounds are very.
So
Yeah.
we usually have three signals, and we usually agree upon time cues. It may differ depending on the duration of something. Then the minimal time limit is usually shown as green. Then you go through yellow, and then red. And in the Toastmasters meeting, the red means that within 30 seconds you must wrap up your message. And as Jenny just mentioned, after these 30 seconds, sometimes people start making noise, so they shut up the speaker by this means. I find that a little bit rude, but that's why I try to not to do it.
As parliamentarians, we talk a lot about appointing a timekeeper and having a timekeeper, but we rarely practice it. And that's why having a Toastmaster meeting, going to Toastmaster meeting, being the timer, you learn to practice. You need to know when to start the time, and you have to remember to reset it in between speakers, which I think is the hardest thing to do. So does anyone, Doris, you have a question, or your husband? Go ahead.
Yes, in Toastmasters, the timing is primarily how long you give the speech. And normally they run over in that speech, but most time they don't stop you. So when we're talking about Toastmasters, it has nothing to do with parliamentary procedures. That's a different story altogether. So when we're talking about Toastmasters, we're being timed on how long your speech is. They give you a certain time to give that speech. And most times they're very kind. They don't cut you off. They let you go, and then they tell you at the end how long you spoke. If you're in a contest, then that timing is very important, because if you're a contestant and you've gone over your time, then most likely you have disqualified yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. That was that's a very good point to make. Toastmasters, they're very kind. They're very, receptive, and they understand. And like you say, they don't criticize you until at the end, and they're not really criticizing you. They're helping you by telling you what you did good and what you could do better. Very kind. Yes.